Welcome everyone. I am, of course, Josh Spicer, and I am the owner here of Game Wisdom. And joining me, my co-host, indie developer working on the game Samurai Pig, Joshua Reyes. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Busy week. Let's see here. Other than that, interesting chat. Looking forward to it. Let's
Hmm.
get going, Josh.
Yep, it's been a very busy week for me as well. I finally finished my
Yeah,
book. It's one
that's
more
right.
book down the or on the list here. So when the book finishes, all my other work automatically gets done. Right, like everything that I've been putting off, it just magically gets finished. All the
It
videos
is
I've been having to hold
every
off on.
everything's done. That's like it complete. It's like the final quest, and everything's done
Mm-hmm.
for a little bit.
Yeah, of
So the DLC,
course. And the DLC is going to be the book I'm going to be starting to write next month on RPG. So
RPGs this time. All right, good deal. I am surprised. I mean, this is like what your
that will be, I think, number 7.
seven. Yeah, my man. So
Ooh.
definitely good deal.
Mm-hmm. And just making sure the stream is still live. Yes, it
I
is.
okay, yeah, because I ran into an error on my camera over here.
All
So let's see. Good. So everything still looks good. Okay.
right.
All right.
Yeah. So we got a fun discussion for today. We're going to be talking about what does losing mean in a video game, and this is something that it both sounds very easy and also very hard to explain. And kind of the inspiration for this chat came when I interviewed the developer behind that game, Azor Pilgrimage of the Slorfs, which is a deck building, survival, crafting, tactical strategy roguelike, which is a whole lot of adjectives right there to describe a game. And
Wow. I'd like to ask about the marketing on that. What's the name of this game?
Zor Pilgrimage of the Slorfs. So you can probably find it through Zor on Steam.
Okay. Okay.
And one of the things that we were talking about, especially when it comes to roguelikes and kind of survival style games,
Yeah.
is walking the player through losing, or specifically through loss. And the reason why this is very tough is that there's this whole idea, I think that, again, like in my tagline here on the thumbnail, that when the whole Dwarf Fortress, Dark Souls kind of, super hardcore difficulty really blew up in the late 2000s into the 2010s, one of the rallying cries that people have said describe these games is losing is fun. And ever since that came to be, I've always argued against that. And the reason why is that if losing was fun, we wouldn't see such huge churn rates on a lot of these games.
Right. Right.
And when I say huge, I've played games that go from 98% to 34% in less than an hour.
Right. And John, let me interject
Yep.
there, Josh. You're saying losing is not fun, and this is like completely true, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're extracting the wrong thing about what is fun. Like it
Mm-hmm.
is a byproduct of, for example, a challenge or something. As humans, we're hardwired to love challenges, to overcome something, to learn something, something of value. And if we suffer a loss during that time, the more losses, and it's not annoying enough, and eventually we overcome it, then it's like, then losing is fun or losing is rewarding,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can say that. So it's like saying losing is fun, though no one enjoy losing. It's like that is like one of the easiest ways to turn someone off. It's like put someone in front of a game and the first thing they do is lose. They're like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
please. I don't losing is definitely not fun, right?
Yeah.
So
Elden Beast. Oh god, don't remind me of that fight, Vincent.
which
That's
one?
the Elden Beast, the final
Oh,
one, and
he does beg to differ for sure,
oh.
Vince.
And yeah, to your point, when we talk about what losing means in a video game, this has changed very big over the last 40 years. Again, when we go all the way back to the origins of the arcade side, there is this whole idea of metrics driven gameplay, which was the idea
Yeah,
is that we want the player to get 90 to 180 seconds of play, and then we want to beat them. We want them to have to put a quarter in. And this led to this era of games being inspired and designed around this to, hey, you play this game, but you lose, it's all gone. And remember, this was before the era of saving. Saving didn't really become standardized until we could probably say like the Super Nintendo era. So that would be like 1990, 1991. And before that, saving was considered a luxury option. Like, it was literally considered like you had to pay extra to have battery backup in your cartridges.
Yeah, the battery backup, and that's still a thing. Like people trying to save their battery backups and losing them, seeing horror stories and memoirs about their saves. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like you said, it was metric. So like it originated, like originally originated as a way to create profit, right? Like you want the player to play, to put another quarter in, to play again. So like you can metrically design, okay, there's at this level, it's definitely going to cost a lot of money for a player of this level to beat the game or beat this level or etc. Right? And then it just kind of like kept going, like you said. But we need to, of course, made adjustments and balances and not taken the lessons of we were enjoying dying, right? Or what was enjoyed out of it was progressing and beating the challenge, of course. So,
yep, and that is a really big point there. And also, when we got to the mobile and live service era, this is when losing really got upended with games or with developers once again returned to metrics-driven design. But in this case, it's a sense of, hey, you lost. How about you give us a few more bucks and we'll give you more resources? Or, again, if losing is fun, the whole gacha industry would have disappeared overnight. Because people like pulling 400 or 500 times on a banner and not getting the character, right? They love that.
What are we going to go out and do tonight, Josh? We're going to go out and lose. We're going to go do some losing, man.
That's where we're going to Las Vegas. That's going to be the next stream. The stream of us just like losing money at the poker table for.
We'll do a live stream, have people donate.
Money comes in, money goes right out.
Yeah.
And to your point about what it means to understand loss, that is exactly, Joe. That is incredibly hard to do. And a lot of developers, again, like you said, like I don't think they really grasp what is happening when someone loses, both from a gameplay perspective and a psychological one.
Yeah.
One of my favorite conversations was with Tomo, and I still need to get him back on again, about we were discussing, like, this was during like the whole Dark Souls, everyone was talking about difficulty, Elden Ring, that kind of thing. And he had a really great point that the player needs to feel like there is momentum, that they are moving forward in some way, shape, or form. And it's something that I've said a lot of times here, that it doesn't have to be a lot. It can just be like going from like here to there. And as long as they can sense that, hey, I'm getting better, or I'm going to have enough resources to buy that fancier sword, or I'm about to level up, that they feel like there's something happening. But when go ahead.
No, like the momentum you mentioned, like definitely, like if the loss is setting you back and you have nothing to show for that loss, right, except frustration, didn't even learn anything. It was RNG wasn't even a right one. Like that is the complete opposite way. So we could go for like to Dark Souls, for example, right? Like which one was it where you would lose? Demon Souls, where you would when you would die, you would lose half your soul or half your life, right? So your life is reduced in half. One of them reduces your life in half.
Yeah, that was Demon Souls.
Demon Souls, and then you lose all your currency. So your currency, your momentum going forward, right? So your momentum would be getting to the bonfire. Your currency, how many enemies you've gotten, how far you've gotten and achieved, and what you've accrued, and then you don't get there, and you lose all that. Your health, that's like the exact opposite. Well, you could go with like maybe like a road or Hades, for example. Okay, you're playing, but you achieve something, you get something new, you unlock a dialogue, for example. That would be the opposite. So yes, momentum needs to continue going forward, because hitting a brick wall over and over again, and more than, I mean, one time. Most people, the first time most people hit a brick wall, they're going to be like, that didn't feel good at all, that was not fun, I don't know what this programmer is into, I'm done, right? Like,
Hmm.
that's it. And if the person maybe likes the series and they go through it a few times, but you need to have momentum going forward, for sure. That's an excellent way to put it.
Hmm. Or you're like me with a brick wall while I was playing as Libra on the second highest difficulty. And I spent an hour and a half at one fight, just
I saw that.
getting punched in the face with the brick wall
Yeah.
again and again, and I kept doing it. But yeah,
Was it an actual wall fight? Like an actual
no.
wall?
Surprised that wasn't a boss fight, considering all the enemies in that game. But yeah, to your point, that if the player feels like they are either stuck or worse, they're going backwards, that is a killer when it comes to these games. And it's also why a lot of very difficult games have high churn within the first 30 minutes to an hour. Like, you'll see, if you look at any achievement page for any of the Souls likes, it will probably start at about 85 to 80% before you actually beats or gets to the first achievement. There are people who have quit Dark Souls games before they even finish the tutorial.
Whoa.
And again, it does not take a lot to get someone to stop playing these games. And when we look at kind of the psychology around losing, again, it's about making sure that the player understands, why did I lose? And
Loose.
that one question is incredibly hard. Because
Yeah.
you're not only having to deal with what the game is telling you, also have to deal with the mentality of the player. How many people have watched rage compilations of people who play games and like, oh, the game is cheating. Oh, I was blocking. The game's reading my input. Oh, I did this, but the game decided not to give it to me. It's the game's fault.
I had my aunt test playing one of my mobile games, and she lost. And she said, "Your game is cheating." I said, "No, it is not cheating. I promise you, there's no cheating involved." And so yeah, like definitely for sure. Like people will believe that it's working against them and it's cheating. If that's how you're feeling, that's not the way we want to be going, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Josh's input. Yep, and it is very hard for a lot of people to be able to actually understand why something didn't happen right.
Right.
And excuse me, and when we look at very difficult games, are the people who are attracted to games like Dwarf Fortress, Dark Souls, Darkest Dungeon, they are oftentimes very analytical people. They are the kind who can sit down and say, okay, I did this attack,
Yes.
the enemy countered, I lost. Or
Right.
I built my deck around quick attacks, and let's say I fought the Devourer of Time boss from Slay the Spire, who counters a lot of low-cost cards.
Of
So,
course, I didn't pay attention to the counter. My bad. Yeah.
yeah.
So
And in this respect, it's not the act of losing that we find fun or engaging. It's the act of improving. It's that
right.
idea of, okay, if I failed because I did this, this, and this, maybe this time I'll do this, this, and that, and I can improve. Or maybe I just get some crazy build. And it's also like as a kind of it's kind of running alongside of still a tangent. It's why pure RNG is very dangerous to the player's enjoyment. And again, when we say, full RNG, we're talking about, I pick up a sword and I swing it explodes and kills me, or I pick up the sword and I instantly win. If the player can't process why they're winning or losing,
Man, let's go flip some coins, Josh. Like, what?
nothing
definitely.
really matters in that respect.
Yeah, nothing matters at all. Like, it doesn't. It does. There's no strategy. You don't know what's going to happen for sure. Yeah, that's not good. Yeah, RNG. I know a lot. And see, a lot of games really rely on the RNG, and it's just always like detrimental. Used properly in some respects, but even then, like when you're trying to get like a random output, nothing's truly random, but RNG to its core is not good for the player. It's not curated. it's a good way to solve the problem, right? The problem being various things that you would need RNG for. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I'll just make it random, right? A curated experience would be much more, or a dynamic curated experience would be much more liberal for better for the player. So
Yep, and what we've seen, and this is something that I was reading about in a procedural generation game design, is that the best games that use proc gen, they use it very sparingly.
yeah, sparse. Yeah, very sparse. And you want to be very strategic. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? You don't want to. We were talking about this on another podcast about Spelunky and like
Mm-hmm.
how many people remember the level design of Spelunky or like this level was. You
Mm-hmm.
remember like okay they used brown and green tiles. Okay, cool. That's all you remember. That's literally all I remember. Brown and green tiles and something else. The other level was lava. You don't really remember anything. But if you had a curated level experience
Mm-hmm.
and you maybe randomly generated something about the enemy instead, right? Or something
Mm-hmm.
about where the power ups, and you could just change it. I'm not saying Spelunky wasn't done right, but the takeaway is about a non curated level design. So using it sparingly, like, is definitely a need. Like, over relying
Mm-hmm.
on it on a crutch is definitely going to leave people feeling not in a good way. Nobody's going to be happy.
Yeah. And one of the big things I think has really shifted this discussion about RNG is that we have this more like player directed RNG or controlled RNG. When we look at some of the latest or some of the more modern examples of deck builders, stuff going from, say, the Spire to Inscription, even Hades as well. This
Yeah,
idea that
Hades.
I beat a level and I can choose what reward I can get from a random pool. So the player is still in control. They don't have perfect control, but it's that difference in psychology between saying, I'm giving you this and no takebacks, or do you want this, this, or this?
Exactly.
Pick what
Kind of
pick this
kind of
pick your
like in
reward.
Vampire Survivor, kind of like that
Mm-hmm.
too, like the upgrades, like
Yep.
that. You mean? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. Yeah, that always feels it's random, but giving you a few choices within a random thing, and the pools are usually within a category that will benefit you in a certain way. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
three different categories. This type of power up, this one, and you pull from those three. Then you'll usually have more of a better result with your RNG if using that type of result for sure. Instead of just picking up the weapon and you die, or it's good, or or it
Yep.
doesn't kill you.
And you need to give that player, as we've said, that sense of control, that reason why am I winning or losing in this?
Yeah,
Because if they don't learn, and this again goes back to the psychology and the design of the game, if the player, when they lose, doesn't understand why they lost, then nothing of value was gained. This is one of these that I was talking about when it comes to onboarding and strategy games. If I die on, or if I die on turn 75 in Civilization, and it was because I made a mistake on turn 20, how the heck is the player going to know that, 50 turns ago I should have
I've been
chosen
there.
this instead of that?
Yeah, I've been there. Like, I don't know how many hours into the game, and I was like, wow, I messed up on turn 20, for example, but now I'm dead at a turn 100, and there's nothing I can do. Right? Yeah, so definitely onboarding is
Mm-hmm.
important there in that respect for sure.
Yep. And again, it's also why it becomes very hard to course correct in this respect. Because everyone who's played or is master of Civilization or Total War or anything from Paradox Interactive, they're going to be like, well, I understand, what's wrong with them? And again, like, this is something that we've said before. You cannot tell someone, oh, just play this game for 500 hours and then you'll figure out the tutorial. If someone's
Right.
not figuring out the tutorial within like 30 seconds, there's a good chance they're leaving. And
Yeah.
some people will argue, well, then they weren't real fans to begin with. But again, good onboarding and good UI UX work is designed to earn you and gain you more fans. Because again, the people who are hardcore action gamers or hardcore strategy gamers, they're going to follow you probably through thick and thin. But if, let's say, that's only 800 copies, 1,000 copies of your game, you could be potentially getting a far greater audience. And again, it's something that we've said about when a lot of niche indie games blow up into the mainstream, and then they tend to die very fast. is because all those mainstream people follow or go to those games. They're like, what the hell is this? Like, is this what people are talking about? They load it up. They go, oh, like I can't control anything. Why am I dying every 5 seconds? Uninstall, and then you lose that person for the rest of your business.
Yeah, that's why onboarding is so important, especially for niche games. You know, you want to reach out to a further audience, you need to have excellent onboarding. So, for sure.
And it's something that we've said again about why it can be very hard for developers to take feedback from playtesting. Because you can have someone lose or say this game is horrible and I don't want to play it, and you'll just go, oh, well, who cares? Why should I listen to them? They just completely blanked out. But as we've said before, everyone has their own tolerance to pain points and issues in these games. Yeah. Someone who gets annoyed at your game may go, well, I don't like this, but I'm still going to stick around. And then someone else will be like, volume slider doesn't work, uninstall, refund.
Yeah. So considering the blood of death, it's like the value of their death, right? Like what do they lose on their death? Like what resources, how far do they have to go back? If it's level based, you have checkpoints. All those things can add up to the replayability of it. Like for example, we would say Super Meat Boy, right? Like you die, instantly respawn, no real resources lost. Compared to maybe WoW or Dark Souls, where you have corpse runs and then resources and stuff like that you lose.
Yeah, and this is something that we said before about how you make or how you get the player back into the game. Super Meat Boy would be a fundamentally different game if you had to wait 3 seconds after each of your deaths.
It would not work at all. If there was a loading screen in between, as long as Rayman loading screens in between each it would not work. It wouldn't even work for a stream, right? Because they'd be trying to stream and and then it'd just be loading and they'd have time to calm down and not rage again. So yeah, it would totally not work. It would be a totally different game for sure.
Yep. And the more emphasis there is on the loss is oftentimes what causes a lot of people to check out these games. That hey, you die now. The last 30 minutes of everything that you've collected and all your resources, that's toss in the fire. Go do it again.
Yeah, definitely. And then of course, you can have the extreme, really extreme games like MMOs where even permadeath and stuff like that, right? We have permadeaths and MMOs where you lose a day of experience and things like that. That's the totally other opposite realm of it.
And games like DayZ, where you die and your entire character can be wiped and all your gear is gone.
Man, that is stressful. That is a stressful game for me, bud.
And
you never played it?
No.
Oh man.
But yet, again, loss can mean different things for different people. Hunt Showdown does something similar, where at a certain account level, if your character gets killed, you lose that character. You lose all the perks on them. You lose whatever weapons they had. And yeah, there are people who love that sense of weight to their loss. I play a lot of my ARPGs with hardcore difficulty.
Really? Do you, Josh?
Yeah, I did Diablo, did Path of Exile, and stuff like that.
How can you deal with the stress of knowing
that could just be that masochism streak in me right there.
Masochism, man. I've seen you play those indie platformers, so for sure you're the ultimate masochist.
But again, I am definitely not the general consumer. And it's why you need to be very mindful of what does it mean for just someone to pick up your game and play it. How are they going to feel after they're done playing? And it's, again, why we've seen more accommodations towards checkpoints, fast travel, to bank resources. Because you never want the player to feel like they're going backwards. One of my biggest pet peeves is when you have a game like a Souls-like or whatever, where if you die, your consumables aren't replaced. Because I feel like if the like we said, like losing the fight is oftentimes punishment enough. You
Yeah.
don't need to put the player back 5 additional steps.
Right, exactly. And yeah, and exactly like in that case with the consumables, right? Or like in Dark Souls where like you're dead, you have half your health, you have no more consumables,
Mm-hmm.
and you also have the defeat of the boss. So like now mentally I have to go farm up consumables before I can even attempt the boss again. I could be set back again by suffering another loss to like some regular mob and go from back further. Right. And so, like, you always need through any death, you still need to have momentum and still be inching forward somehow. It's
Mm-hmm.
really, I don't think there's any reason. I mean, I guess, there's games that, like you were saying, there's hardcore modes and stuff like that. But for like the majority of the audience, having that hardcore
Mm-hmm.
of a death value or setback is not that enticing.
Mm-hmm. And for some people, even just knowing that they can lose is oftentimes stressful enough to get them not to play. The idea that, oh, if at any time I can just lose all my resources, or now I'm, at a quarter of health with no resources, I can't get back to a save. What am I supposed to do? And this is, again, one of the great fallacies when it comes to difficulty. When we look at a lot of arcade style games, very pattern heavy designs, they're oftentimes very easy if you know exactly what that pattern is. Stuff
Right.
like the original Ninja Gaiden, R-type, shmups, that kind of thing. So the punishment, this is something that we were saying earlier, that you don't want to make the game punishing towards the people who don't want it. The Demon Souls example is a really good one. If you never die, you never suffer the half health penalty. It's just that simple. As long as
Yeah.
you just
Just
close
don't
your eye,
die.
just close your eyes and say, "Nope, I didn't die," and the game will just fill your health back up.
That's right.
But again, for people who like a challenge, they're fine with that, or they may never even see it. But when you build punishment systems into the game on failure, well, you're punishing the people who aren't good at the game. The people who don't need to have their health halved or quartered. And they're going to become very frustrated.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So like you definitely need to have some type of solution, right? Because in that regard, there is no we're setting the player back, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing. And of course you could always say like in did they learn something from the fight? Maybe, maybe not, because depending again, like how they got to that fight, was it their only chance with their only amount of consumables they had to get there? They've never been to the boss before, and like how can you get there again? So yeah, that'll just definitely be very debilitating for a player for sure.
Mm-hmm. And this is also why we've seen this use of progressive difficulty in a lot of roguelikes these days. Be it Slay the Spire, Monster Train, Hades with a Pact of Punishment. The idea is that you want base level of your game to be as approachable and as easy as it can be. You want the majority of your players to be able to get through your game, or at least be able to experience and enjoy it. And then for the people who, let's say, they want more enemy health, or enemies do more damage, or shops are more expensive, let them go down that rabbit hole, but keep it away from the people who don't want to start a game at, Ascension level 25 and Slay the Spire. And, oh, go ahead.
No, go
Uh,
ahead. Yeah, progressive level difficulty. That's really interesting. I didn't know that they were starting to implement that more into roguelikes.
mhm.
I didn't know that was more. I like that a lot because if I don't want to experience those type of pain points, but I do want, but I do. But if I did want the shop to be like twice as many crystals to purchase things or something, then I
Mhm.
would have to experience that. I do like that. That's a good idea.
Yeah. I kind of see this as an evolution of Nintendo's style with their games. Again, as a somewhat of a plug, Josh, Seth, and I, we just recorded the first episode of our Influential Games series. So we talked about platformers, and they'll probably go up in like a week or so from our recording here. And we certainly harped on Nintendo during that conversation. And one of the things that they do really well is that they present their games very approachable to all skill levels, and then it gets narrower and narrower as you get further into a Mario game. And again, anyone who's played a Mario game all the way through, we're not just talking about beating
all the way.
Bowser, we're talking max stars, max
All the
shinies,
stars.
the post game challenges. You
Yeah.
know Nintendo can get very mean with their level
Yeah.
designs.
Yeah. It's really surprising. Like they, and they again, like how we also talked about like having a novelty of mechanics and stuff, and then eventually, like toward the end, they're like, okay, they have all the mechanics included in their at the very end, and you have to master all like every single skill in Mario to max out right at the end. So that's an excellent way to design it, also.
Hmm. I mean, who here has beat Darker Side in Super Mario Odyssey?
Oh my, Josh.
Yes, I did. And yet, again, Nintendo knows that there's going to be people who will play Darker Side. I did not do the Super Mario 3D World, like super advanced one. That's the one like masochistic Mario level I have not been able to do. But they know there's going to be people who are like, I want to see you, take the gloves off. I want to see what super high level Mario Odyssey or whatever Mario game we're playing gameplay looks like. And there's gonna be people who are like, nope, I don't want to touch that. I saved Peach. The game is over. I never want. I'm done. You can save all that other stuff for someone else.
Yeah.
And,
It's the people that want to beat Skyrim in like 5 hours and not do any of the side quests and just be like, I'm done.
mm-hmm. And you want to have those accommodations because, again, people are going to treat your game differently based on their own preference and their own psychology. There are a lot of people who never even bother touching the different side challenges in Celeste. They may have stopped playing Celeste after like 3 chapters.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want more Celeste, if you want to keep going in that one, you have the A side, the B side, the C side, the Farewell DLC, which was just a nightmare and a half to play. It keeps going. And there are a lot of people who never saw any of that. But if they can at least leave the game knowing that they got, the full deal, they got the full experience from them, then that's good.
For sure, Josh. For sure. Yeah,
Now,
Skyrim in 5 hours. I think he can. I think he do it in 5 hours.
now, to go back to the idea of understanding what loss means, I think this is, again, very hard to put into words. I guess for you, with the games, like when you play an action game or any kind of game that has like extreme loss states, what goes through your head when you lose in one of those games?
Well, I mean, one of the most important things is always like if you want to get failure is an opportunity for success, right? So
Mm-hmm.
somehow, some way, you have to feel like I will be able to succeed. I did learn something. I learned, okay, I didn't parry this correctly, or I didn't do this correctly. What's going through my head when I use an action game is, hopefully I learn from it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the main thing, is you want to be able to learn from your losses, right? Because, a reward for failure is what we're looking for. We're looking for the challenge and to overcome it. So,
Mm-hmm.
what are you thinking, Josh, when you experience a loss in like Bayonetta, or
Again,
do
like,
you?
yeah, I do lose sometimes. The first thing I try to think about is what did I do wrong? What was my mistake in that fight, and how do I correct it? For a lot of times when I play roguelikes for the first time, I will oftentimes take, you know, and they had like, 70% chance you get something good, 30% chance you just die immediately. I will oftentimes take that risk just to see what it gets me. Because I'm trying to build that knowledge base up about how this game works. But, again, there are a lot of games I've played where it just feels like there is literally nothing I could have done differently, and I still lose. And that is where it exactly, Joe. Yep. that when I lose like that, that's when a game begins to lose me. Where it feels like, it's not because I didn't play right. It was because the developer, put their finger on the scale, or they, hit the "it's time to lose" switch, and there was nothing you could have done about it. And some games, yeah, exactly. Vince says, "Well, die one, refund game." There are a lot of people who have done that. Again,
Yeah,
the Souls likes are proof of that
for sure,
statement.
for
But
sure.
I guess here's as a follow up question for you and for the chat. When do you feel like there was nothing you could have done? Like, when do you feel like the loss was completely out of your hands? Like, are there like any examples, or like when do you start to like feel like that is happening in a game?
For sure, like for sure, I'm gonna just like off the top, of course, one hits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like one hit kills, of course, like of any other way, and it's like yeah, one shot, right? Vince says right there, one shot's number one, and then of course, like another one I've experienced that's really strange is like for RNG, where you get like random damage from like similar attacks. I don't know if you've played that in games where like the damage calculation isn't proper, and so
Mm-hmm.
they'll just do RNG on your damage, and so like the same hit will do like two, like maybe like 200, and then the second one will do like 4 million, and you're dead. It's the same thing as a one shot, but they just use RNG for damage poorly. Poison burning on any dot, for example. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
That's just my strategy for a lot of RPGs right
Yeah, yeah.
there.
For RPGs, it's just dots, dots. Number one.
Mm-hmm.
I always, because my wife is been, she's like obsessed with Final Fantasy 14 now, and the main thing I'm always is like, she's always like, make sure the dots are up, make sure your dots are up.
Yeah, for me, again, it's when it feels like the game that I'm playing is not the same as the game that a developer has built the AI around. So,
Yeah,
like, The Surge, I think, was a really good example for me. That it felt like no matter how I was fighting these enemies, they either one shotted me, or like it just felt like there was nothing I could have done. Like, it typically went from like here to there
yeah,
in like an
some difficulty
instant.
spikes for sure. Yeah, and sometimes I feel like that happens. Like you, like when you said it feels like it was like a one-off enemy, something like that, or just pops out of nowhere. They just introduce it, and again, it comes with balancing, right? They don't balance like the HP or like maybe like what upgrades you should have at that point in the time in the game or where you should be at, and they don't factor that in there, and there's like nothing you can do. Yeah, and so especially like again that brick wall thing, like so
Mm-hmm.
if you're going up a brick wall of HP, it is just as frustrating as like any other thing, right? There's like, wait, there's nothing I can do with this a million HP
Mm-hmm.
boss here, or just regular enemy mob.
Yeah, and I think one of my first like memories of something like painful like this was in the original God of War. That final section when you have to protect his family and like the dream and all those enemies are spawning around.
Yeah,
Oh, I hated that on the highest
yeah,
difficulty. And
yeah.
part of the problem was that Kratos with his attacks was not really designed around specifically targeting set areas in the field. He's about very wide, very chaotic hits. So you're then telling the player, oh, but you must defend this one spot, and if anything gets through, you just lose immediately. That was just horrid.
Yeah, again, that's when you're using you're not taking account the mechanics that the
Mm-hmm.
player can utilize, and then the level design, right? Like they could have definitely like fixed the level design, like siphoned it in a certain way, and so that your attacks would actually work, but they didn't. So yeah, so that's again, and always be aware of how the mechanics work in level design for sure. That's a good example of that, Josh, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and again, you don't want the game to counter the player's gameplay. Sense. Again, those are one of
Yeah.
the things that was kind of frustrating about Slay the Spire. Again, that a lot of the bosses were explicitly built around hard counters. If you build your deck around this, and the boss is the hard counter, you're done. Like, there is no skill, there's nothing that you could do if the boss just explicitly counters whatever your strategy was. And it's why some of the later examples now will tell you hey, you're going to be fighting so and so, and this guy is going to, he'll gain bonuses every time you play 5 cards. So maybe you shouldn't be thinking about building a low cost, rapid fire deck this time.
Yeah, definitely. And that's like when edge cases aren't considered, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how you're saying is like there's only one hard counter. So the edge case is that you build your deck around that, like you were saying, and the only way is he's your hard counter, right? So there's no edge case,
Mm-hmm.
and there's only one way to approach it. And so that's that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and that again gets back to this idea of losing is fun. That if the player loses simply because, hey, you needed card 27 out of 150, because that's the card that exactly counters this boss fight, and you didn't get it, it's like, so how do I improve? Do I,
Yeah.
do I pray to RNG before I start playing the game? And maybe I will get that.
Yeah.
And again,
and again, that brings back RNG being bad, being a bad crutch.
mm-hmm.
Definitely. Good.
And there are a lot of games that, again, they will make their win cases too specific. That if you don't draw X, Y, and Z, or if you don't have this exact sword or this exact armor, that you lose, or the game just spikes. Ast Libra is a really good example of this. What they do in the game is that a lot of the armor and weapons will give you unlockable passive skills once you kind of use that gear. But you don't know what those skills are until you actually craft, buy, and use the armor. So one of these skills in the game that completely broke it for me was the one that deletes enemy bullets whenever you use one of your magic spells. So if you did not get that specific piece of gear, and you don't have that for some of those bosses, good luck. Just very good luck when the screen just goes like that on you.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's like short sightedness. It's like there's just so much involved in designing a game and balancing it, and sometimes it's like the developers like, well, okay, for this one case, they just need to make sure to have that, and they expect that all players will go that way. And unfortunately, every player literally is going to go a different way. Like even many will behave the same, but they're all going to kind of go a different slight path, right? Like
exactly, and that I think is where Ast Libra kind of falls apart. It's a game that expects you to be up here in terms of an action RPG fan. They expect you to be that kind of person who's like, you know what? If every weapon says it has a skill, I am going to grind every enemy. I will buy every piece of gear. I will use every piece of gear.
bro.
But if you're not that kind of person, or if you want to play the game just casually, and you don't know that all these bonuses are over here that will make your life 1,000 times easier, you're going to walk into this and go, why the hell is this game so difficult? What are people talking about? Uninstall, refund.
In a utopia of endless time, I'm sure that sounded like, as the developer was thinking it as like the most perfect way to design it. He was like, they're just going to have to go grind this one thing that's going to take forever. They're going to go after grind for this one weapon. It'll take forever. Great. I got 80 hours of play now. Awesome. And yeah, it would be great if we had that much time. But of course, like again, one of the things, like you were saying earlier, Josh, like one of the main things that Nintendo does so well is like, if I want to just beat Princess Peach in a few hours, I can. But if I want to go and collect every single massive shiny and find Yoshi at the top of the castle, like you can do that. And like, but of course that requires mastery, and mastery that is like properly shown, and like in the like they expose it in the right way. They like and it's so the character, so the player knows how to get there, and of course it's that player that will select it on their own, right? They're not forced into it. So
yep, and again, this is why we see this kind of progressive difficulty aspect in a lot more roguelikes. You're asking the player to buy into the difficulty. You're not starting them saying, okay, we're going to turn on every difficulty modifier, and then if you win, your reward is to turn one off. That would be absolutely horrible to design a game around. Because, again, you don't want to you don't want to challenge the group of people who aren't ready for it.
That's excellent the way you stated that,
Yeah.
Josh. And I feel like a lot of designers go that way. It's like it's like you start the game at level one. Here's all your punishments. The more you play, you can remove one, remove another, and it shouldn't be like that. That's like the exact opposite.
Yep, and it goes back to one of the weirdest things that we see from a lot of games when they have the infinite ammo, infinite super reward for beating the game on the most impossibly hard, why are you doing this to yourself difficulty challenge. Again, I beat Resident Evil 2 Remake with an S plus rating on hardcore difficulty, and I got my infinite rocket launcher. But
Okay.
again, at that point,
So what did you do with your infinite rocket? Did
nothing.
you load it and you're like blasted a few things? You're like, cool, I got it, right?
There's no reason for it at that point. If I can beat your game without using any weapons and just speeding through it, I don't need an infinite rocket launcher.
Yeah, like in Metal Gear Solid, I can't remember what I got, and it was is it the bandana or something?
Yeah,
And it's infinite ammo too, right? It's infinite ammo, and you're already a god by then, and so there's no point. My little sister was like, "But you've already beaten it like 40 times. What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I got it though."
you gotta use it. They gave it to you. You gotta at least use it once.
Try it out.
Yeah, and again, you know who could have used an infinite rocket launcher? Someone who can't even get past, Mr. X for the first time.
Exactly.
Or who died 20 times to the first Birkin battle. And yeah, again, it's one of those differences we see when it comes to like approachability and assist options. Someone who is the god gamer at Celeste, they are never going to turn on infinite jump or infinite dash or invulnerability. But someone who just wants to play the game, and again, if we're talking about the general consumer, not talking about, heavy, hardcore review analysis of a game, for someone who just wants to play a game, let them have invulnerability, let them have infinite ammo and infinite fire or whatever. Because if they can at least get through that game, good for them. For someone who doesn't need that, who's going to turn on all those extra difficulty settings, good for them as well. That's fine.
Yeah, and not only that, that just adds to like your retention, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you'll have so many people that would be turned off instantly and be like, I don't have the reaction time for this, I don't have whatever, and they just be able to experience it and play along, right? No harm, no foul. Be great.
Mm-hmm. But again, a lot of people will view difficulty kind of in that inverse, that, hey, we want to make the game as hard as possible at the start, so, we weed out the undesirables or the lesser gamers. And that's not how you want to approach it. You want your game to be as entertaining at minute 1 as it is at hour 100 if you decide to go that far, people are still playing it. And having, very punishing loss states is not how you want to do this. Because again, losing only affects people who aren't, masters or aren't skilled at the game. When I play a game like Darkest Dungeon or an action roguelike, I don't die as much as, someone else at these games because I know how these games work. I played Darkest Dungeon enough times to do a Let's Play a series on it. I was able to play it so that it's rare for me to have a full party wipe. But for someone else starting out, they may decide to have that Shambler fight in the first 10 minutes, or they may go into a dungeon that only need torches and food, and then everyone just gets white. And if they didn't know about it, and here's another really good point from a UX perspective. If the player is doing something so unintentionally wrong, like it is fundamentally, they
like
are
not bringing
not
torches in the.
Yeah, if they are doing something like that, have a UI prompt. Because this is not, the player like learning the game or, a tough lesson. This is them just completely missing an element of your game. And if they lose because they didn't know something, because maybe they didn't pay attention, or maybe they didn't quite understand just how important torches and food are, you need to let them know, because that kind of failure is bad. Like, if they
Yeah.
load it up and it's like, okay, I take 3 steps, everyone starves, torches out, whole party wipes, that's, keyboard, smashing monitor moment right there.
Right. Okay. So A, like if you think if the player learned, okay, I should have brought torches, I should have brought food from that fight instead of uninstalling the game. Okay, then maybe they'll be like, cool. But like the other way would have been like as you're about to start, it pops up and it says, hey, I noticed you don't have any food, you don't have any light.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably pretty good if you do that. And so what that is, like someone mentioned earlier, it's the developer's fault. In that respect, it's kind of the developer's fault because
Mm-hmm.
you're expecting the player to be that like observant and that um I get like that observant about your game and pay attention to and there's a lot going on in that type of game, right? They're not really even sure. They might not even have like ever played anything with like cards or like I don't know, like and so like even like that alone right there. So definitely for sure, if your player if they're doing something like in a game, right? Like in a shooting game or something and they're loading out and for example, you could load out with nothing. I don't know, for example, and it's like hey, I noticed you didn't load out with anything. Maybe you want to have a loadout here, and or
Mm-hmm.
this is the recommended loadout for newbies or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And that would be, and that would be the thing. But definitely that is something that would definitely help with retention because, like, I guarantee you, like, if I went in and here's another side tangent. I think that was covered enough, but I'm not sure if, like, from the arcade side, from when it went to like, okay, we have to put quarters in and monetize to the internet side to where everything became facts to did developers think okay for sure anyone who's playing this game is going to look up a fact and they're going to know how to play my game before they play
Mm.
it and I'm wondering if that has become prevalent in some way.
I think for a lot of niche games that it's still there. The
Right.
idea
Yeah.
that you're not playing the game by yourself, you're going onto the forums or to a Discord or a Reddit and you're playing it with everyone else around you. So we don't need to explain things because if you're confused, you and the other 10,000 other people will figure out eventually. But yeah, that is definitely not how you want to design a game like this. You do not want, and I've said this many times over, you don't want the player to have to leave your game in order to learn how to play it. That is a super failure of
Yeah.
onboarding and tutorials. And there are
Yeah.
a lot of developers. I guess as a kind of a somewhat of a side question, but for you, what do you think about games where instead of having an in-game tutorial, they will link to YouTube videos?
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. I think that is in a way okay. I would think a nice middle ground. I know some play they like include the like a GIF in there, or I have some devs that'll do like a little GIF or something
Yeah.
like the God of War. They showed it, but
Mm-hmm.
like I think that linking to a YouTube video is horrendous, and you really shouldn't do that. I think that well, yeah, it does work in a way, and it's okay, but like me again, leaving the game is me literally leaving the game, like in any form or fashion. If you
Mm-hmm.
if you're saying, "Hey, I need you to go to this YouTube video," and you'll know, and then you can come back and you can play, I might probably not come back
Yep.
because there really shouldn't be any reason for me to leave. Like that is definitely if I am playing a game and I get to a point where I feel frustrated enough that I'm like, wait a second, do I need to look up a fact now? That's usually probably the time that I will like push away from the desk and be like, okay, I think I might be done. You know what I mean? I actually have
Mm-hmm.
to push through that moment to want to keep playing the game, Josh.
Yep. If you think that's bad, if you ever played like a war game back in the 90s, their whole tutorial was you're going to read the tutorial section in the manual, then you go into the game to do it, then you go back to the manual, look at the next lesson, then you go back to the game, and that was the last time I played a war game because it was just not connecting. And like you said, like if you want to have an animated GIF in your game, with a tutorial prompt. The tutorial says you must click on this, this, and this, and you watch a video of the mouse going "Duh," like that. Yeah, that's fine. But it's still being done in game. And to Vincent's comment, yeah, and a huge point about the release of Dwarf Fortress is the fact that with Kit Fox's guidance and help, there's an actual in-game tutorial. There's now going to be onboarding for Dwarf Fortress. And that, as we were talking about on the show with Seth the other night, that's going to be really interesting to see how Dwarf Fortress is going to do in terms of onboarding. I will be very curious to, in 1 year from now, or 1 year after its release, look at the achievement page for Dwarf Fortress and see the churn rates.
Yeah, I am definitely, because this will be the first time that I actually will play it, because I did the same thing, for Dwarf Fortress. I was like, okay, I'm going to check this thing out, because I've read a lot about how the AI worked and stuff, and I was really interested in a lot of the stuff, like how everything works. So I said, well, let me try this. Let me check it out. It's ASCII. I can deal with it. But then I found out that I had to read 500-page tutorials made by other players. And they're like, no worries, it's easy. You'll get it. It takes probably about 500 hours, but you'll figure it out, and it's totally worth it. And so then I noped out of it. So yeah, I want to see if Dwarf Fortress can capture the onboarding.
And speaking about Dwarf Fortress, this again goes back to what we were talking about in terms of people copying other games. We've been talking about for the last decade someone making the mythical, approachable take on Dwarf Fortress. That game that could make a Dwarf Fortress and make it easy to learn, and onboarding is there, and the UI works. And not one developer has managed to really get to that level. We could maybe argue that something like RimWorld came pretty close. But again, a lot of developers made that mistake of, well, if it's hard and confusing to learn Dwarf Fortress, surely I can do that in my game. If it worked for them, why won't it work for me? And what we've learned is that, no, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work. In Dwarf Fortress is one in a million like that. And then any other game that tried to do that and try and be, let's say, again, we said that, just because, being first is super important. Dwarf Fortress was first, in that regard. And so if someone comes along and, hey, I'm Dwarf Fortress, here's our 900-page manual instead, probably not going to work very well, right? And yeah.
And to go back to Darkest Dungeon and kind of use cases, I just want to mention one other point before I forget. If you have a game that is very dependent on letting the player make decisions or choose what gear, perks, whatever, in your tutorial and your onboarding, try to give them a standard or what is the safest build? Should I always bring 6 torches and 5 sets of food in Darkest Dungeon? Should I make sure I have this, this, and this? Again, a lot of developers are really, I think, afraid of telling the player how to play a game. But if we're talking about foundational, if you can't even do X, Y, and Z right, then you're never going to win kind of stuff, spell that out for them. Make that as clear as day. Like Josh said, that, hey, you're not bringing torches into a place where not having light will kill you. Are you sure you want to do that? Or even go further and say, the recommended number of torches is blank. Are you sure you want to go with less than blank?
Yeah, exactly. Or just have recommended torches right there, boom, and you would unclick it if you didn't want to bring them.
Yeah. Because with Darkest Dungeon, there are dark runs. There are people who've come up with strategy that you don't take any torches and you just break the game like that. And again, this is why when you're designing your game, you want to balance it around a wide spectrum. You're going to have someone who will never let the darkness level go, beyond 2 in Darkest Dungeon, and you'll have some people like, you know what? Everyone is now blind in the dark. I am, light is evil. I will never take a torch. And yet, you want to be accommodating. And again, I think a lot of people are afraid of, pissing off the wrong group. They either make it so simple, so straightforward that people get bored playing, or they only care to the super hardcore. And then they wonder, well, why aren't you figuring out you have to do these 47 steps in this exact order to beat this fight? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, definitely in that regard. Like, it's best to make it make it most on the onboarding so the most people can play at the beginning, master it, get as far, and then further up at the top like that. And that's the way to do it, not start the other way around. And again, push all the pain points on at once, and then as they get better, they get removed, because that's not really how play works.
No.
How players work.
No, people, and this is something I was reading on a Twitter thread earlier, that people don't want to start a game at its worst. There have been talks about this idea of, the reverse Metroidvania, that you get weaker over time, or the game gets worse the further you play it. And while that can certainly be an interesting experiment, that's not a good game. How many people want to play a game like, hey, you can jump and run really fast? Well, in 1 hour, you can only walk like this, and you lose the power to jump.
Yeah, you can't. No more wall jumps. Yeah, I mean, take away your double jump after you beat the second level. That would be terrifying.
Yeah. Lose your gun. Now you can't heal. Now you're one shot away from death. It's exciting. And when you're trying to design your game around losing, again, the more important something, and as a quick time check, we're about an hour, so I think we'll wrap something like the next 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
The more important something is to the actual play of your game, the easier to almost non-existent difficulty there should be to get that back. Like, there should be nothing, you should not be able to, lose all your healing. Like, this is, again, one of those mainstays of a lot of older RPGs, where, you are 75 minutes in this dungeon, but you have no more potions, and now you can't leave the dungeon because you can't fight your way back out, so you're now essentially soft-locked, unless, someone comes in and gets you, like we saw with, EverQuest or those kinds of games. That kind of stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
And like you mentioned, how people will do runs, the darkest runs, with no light. Players will find empty, man. Players will find a way, if your game is enjoyable and made right from the start and doesn't just destroy them with though if the game feels good and plays right and it doesn't pummel them with punishment at first, but the player does enjoy punishment, they'll find ways to punish themselves.
Yes.
And right? What I mean? I have seen some of the craziest speedruns where they're yeah, I'm not going to use this for the whole run. I'm not going to heal for the whole run. So, in a way, you don't really have to do that to the player. You don't have to impede those things or force those things on the player, because that type of player, they're going to do that on their own.
I will play a Dark Souls game at soul level 1 with completely naked, using just a stick, and I will beat this game. I saw someone on Twitter who plays all the Souls hitless. Played all.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine the mental pain that is to play a Dark Souls game and not take a hit.
Take the hitless, and they'll do the hitless SL1. I've seen SL1 hitless runs. Just maddening. I've done that. I've done the SL run naked with the club, and I stopped at the Four Kings. And that was done.
Yeah, and again, as you just said, if there is a way to make a game hard, your players are going to find it, whether you explicitly built your game around that or not. You don't need to start the game around that. Because again, that's how you churn out a lot of your players. And again, some people will want to play your game at the highest possible difficulty or the most extreme modifiers on. But that is oftentimes a subset of a subset
subset
of a
of a
subset.
subset. Definitely.
And yeah, two what was it? BMV there. Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier with progressive difficulty, with ascension modes, the pact of punishment. Like we've said, when it comes to player psychology and this act of losing, the player has to be kind of, the one to cause either their success or their failure. It's why it is very different in deck builders that the player decides what reward they get. Because if the player didn't do that and they lost, you know what they're going to say? Well, the game gave me all these bad cards, so I failed, so the game is stupid. But if I chose those cards and I picked those perks and those artifacts and I lost, then it's on me. It's because I did that. And like we said, you want the player to be the arbiter of whether or not they win or lose. If the game just decides, okay, if it rolls a 1 out of a 500 and you get that number 1, you just immediately die, there's no learning from that. There's no way for the player to say, well, next time, I just hope the game decides not to roll a 1.
Yeah, definitely. And there's just nothing you can hope for. So like always want to have some type of reward for failure, some type of learning. There just has to be something for it because, I mean, while it is a mechanic, it does have to provide something other than just a normal fail state, right? Like just saying, okay, I needed a fail state, here's the fail state. That's not solving the issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
From the fail state should provide something for the player. Why did you fail? What do you need to learn? How can you overcome this? What did you do wrong? What can you do better? And doing all those things will help out. And again, like pushing the player out first things first with massive amount of pain points for punishment for fun, that doesn't work. Allow the player to that wants to find that to opt in, or eventually they'll get there on their own through enjoyment of your game.
Yep. And you, again, as you said, you always want them to feel like, even if they're not actually moving forward in the game, you want them to feel like they are improving. That, instead of, oh, I didn't need to build 55 pickaxes. Maybe from now on I only need 20. And then I can go do this. You want them to feel like they are improving at some level of the game. We talk a lot about abstracted progression in games. I level my character from 3 to 4. My sword now does 35 points of damage. But a lot of people don't understand the idea of the player progressing. The idea that, hey, I now know how to properly parry. Or I can now read these enemy tells a lot better, so now I won't get hit. And to what we were talking about earlier with like the Souls-likes, it's where that dopamine rush comes in. It's why, for people who play these games, when you see that, demon has been killed or monster slain, you get that rush of dopamine. Because you did that. You figured out how to beat Champion Gundyr, or you beat the Elder Beast. And whatever. It's on you. You succeeded. The game didn't just say, again, like to a Dark Souls player, like imagine if a prompt come up that says, hey, you died a lot of this fight. Would you like to skip it? How many Dark Souls fans would say, yes, I don't want to beat this boss?
Yeah, and definitely like we were talking about with the dopamine rush, and if everything's RNG and it's the exact opposite, there's like no rush in the opposite either. It's just kind of like, right? Like, okay, it didn't lose. Oh, I lost this time. Right? So definitely always that RNG, man. Watch out with that.
Mm-hmm. And again, if the player can't figure out why they're winning or they're losing, nothing else is really going to matter in terms of engagement. It's one of the things why I've kind of been following, I kind of got tired of Marvel Snap, was that it felt like the game itself was already solved, and yeah, we do need to have that roundtable again about how,
you said kind of tired of it.
Yeah. I know Seth may be playing more of it, however, from our message, but
yeah, he was trying to get me to play. I said no.
But you have to understand that if the player can't feel like they are winning or that they are learning from it, again, if it's that case of I lost because the game just decided that I lost and there was nothing more I could do, why should I keep playing? And it's one of those problems I have with a lot of competitive driven games where winning requires you to be exactly here. And if let's say you can only come up to here, or maybe there, you will never be able to win. And once that kind of equation has been solved, where else do you go? I guess it's kind of funny that I've gone so completely away from competitive games, and yet I will play roguelikes and roguelites for hundreds of hours simply because of that idea that I can have these very weird runs. Again, anyone who's played Binding of Isaac knows that no two runs are alike.
Yeah.
You can have a winning run go poor, and you can have a horrible run get that, 1 in 800 miracle drop, and now you just broke the entire game. And it's that level of variance and excitement that, again, it's built off of the player's skill that makes them so engaging.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah, we need to. We'll get Seth on for a Marvel Snapchat, and we'll rant and rave about that one. But again, I think that's a really. Here's a question for you and for the chat as well. Speaking about competitive games, how do you take losing in a competitive game? Because we've spent the last hour or so talking about single player games, something about games where it's you versus the AI. But what happens when it's you versus another human, and that person just wallops you? It is, not even a. It's not even like you weren't even like a blip on their radar, and they just crushed you.
Yosha's bad. Just
Yeah.
bad. Actually, one of my favorite competitive games that I always play is Tekken 7. I played some this morning, about an hour or so. I always take the loss. Sometimes you get decimated and there's just nothing you can do. And you just know that the skill gap between you and that other person is so immense. There's no way you could ever beat that person. But you always try and take something away, right? So, like with competitive gaming, it's more about what you as a person learn from that. Like you can take away from that anger and be like, oh, that player was cheating or this and that.
Oh.
Or you can actually see, okay, did I miss this parry? Did I not block here correctly? Maybe I was rushing into the fight. I didn't read that right, or I didn't know this player. But for me personally, I always try and take something away from each fight and learn from it. So that's just me personally. You, Josh?
Yeah, again, like for a lot of competitive games, one I find just like the stress of worrying about like a ranking and yeah, exactly, Joe. Yeah, they're always cheating.
Cheating. Always cheating.
No one has ever said that about a competitive game ever, right? In the history of the video game industry.
Like you said, the stress of the ranking. Oh my gosh, yeah. A lot of the times I'll play unranked just to avoid the stress sometimes. Go ahead.
But yeah, as you said, like when it comes to competitive games, I think in particular, they're oftentimes some of the worst when it comes to onboarding and properly training the player.
Yeah, oh yeah, none.
And it is a very, again, like when we talk about player based games like this, onboarding is kind of next to impossible because you can't develop a tutorial around an opponent that is constantly shifting and changing based on, who am I playing today? And this was one of the issues I had with Dead by Daylight, that Dead by Daylight has some terrible onboarding because they've done nothing to explain, over 6 years of new perks and new mechanics and new abilities. And again, it goes back to why you need to have a kind of a set case or a set experience or a baseline to then build your game around. That, hey, players may use so and so. Be aware that this is a thing in this game. Because you don't want the player to have to try and learn something in the middle of a competitive match. They're not going to be, focusing on that. Yes, it has, Chris. It's actually been 6.5 years, I think, now.
Yeah, and I think it's exactly been the same. Like, it has not changed at all, that onboarding. Because I remember when I first played it, I was like, what is this. I don't even know how to play yet still. And they're getting murdered.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and
But just turn on the generators.
uh-huh. But that doesn't work when you're the killer. Just kill everyone. That's
Kill
all
everyone.
that's
That's
really you
all.
need. Yep, and it's very, and again, like, different player mentalities will really reign in these kinds of games. You will have someone, like, again, when we talk about pro level or competitively driven players, they're going to be the kind of people who will try and figure out, okay, why did I lose? Did I take too long doing this? Did I do that? But getting other people or someone who doesn't have that mindset to enjoy the game is hard, and it's why a lot of competitively driven games have high churn rates. Because for everyone else, they'll be like, oh, so the rest of this game is just going to be me trying to win for the next 100 hours and saying, you
Yeah.
lose.
You
You
lose.
lose.
You lose. You lose. Yeah, and it's like, and that's also just another side tangent about that, about
Mhm.
matchmaking, right? Like sometimes, like when in a game, like for example, that's been out for 6 years, most of the players have been playing for the majority of that time,
Yep.
and so you're coming in there as just a, oh, what is a generator? And they're like, and so, and you either have to endure that or like have some other type of like onboarding that would be better, right? So like
Mhm.
so Joe, you're saying you just turn on the generators, that's true, but you're dealing with like pros that know everything about it. So it would help, right? Go ahead.
And they have all the perks, and they know
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
exploit, and they know, and what, you didn't bring this and this, so you don't have the additional repair time. You're horrible. Why are you on my team?
Chris solved it right there.
But you also need to be aware of what is it like to play the game with those buffs, and what is it like
And
to play it.
without
Yeah,
without
because there you run into the other problem. Hey, I won
exactly.
all these games. Oh, it turns out I've had 50%
Oh,
more stamina, 20% more health. I do 8 times more damage. Now it's gone. It's like, uh-oh.
and that was that fact they were just talking about as the game getting worse, because that's not how you want to play a game. You don't want to start off. We mentioned that before, like God of War. You start off with all these powers, and it's like, well, eventually, like at the end, you'll get these all back. It'll be cool. Don't worry. And you're like, man, I really wanted that thunder thing that I lost. You
Mm-hmm.
took away right away. But yeah, like a game, like yeah, for sure, that'll give you the opposite. All of a sudden, you'll be like winning and winning, and then boom, your stamina's back down to normal, and it is everybody's, yeah, murdering you. Plus 50 speed, 40%. Yeah.
And since every cast these days, I have a hill that I will die on, my hill for today is that I cannot stand games that have consumables that are like game changing. That they completely radically change what you're doing, and then they burn away if you win or lose. Like, that was one of the things about Dead by Daylight, is that every
I didn't like
character
that.
has these consumable items that will radically change how the perks play. And the game is balanced around that, and I just cannot
Yeah.
stand. Again, you're talking to someone who's been playing RPGs for over 30 years now. Like, the hoarder syndrome is real. And I cannot stand a game where it's like, hey, here's a super cool, awesome ability. Oh, you use it, now it's gone. I hope you get another copy of it.
Yeah, I didn't use them because I was like, I don't think I'm gonna get that one ever again. And then, you know what I mean? And then, of course, when you're talking about balancing issues, what are the other people that are doing like that? what
Yep.
are what are they using? But yeah, that's really bad. We got to go do one about the hoarder thing for
Oh.
sure.
And again, it's why I like something like with like the Payday 2 system, or what we see from games where, okay, you can build your loadout out of all these perks. If you want to respec, boom, okay, build around all this now. And it's permanent, that you don't have to, make a choice that is going to last you, for only 2 runs, or you can change things up as you see fit. And again, I think, kind of like our MO, or like the main point for our cast is that the player needs to be the one in control. They need to be the one making these decisions. They need to be understanding, why is my sword bouncing off of this enemy? Why did this guy just, cough on me and took out 85% of my health? If they can't figure this stuff out, or the game is not explaining it to them, then losing is never going to be enjoyable. They're just going to feel like the game is just out to get them. But if they lose because of something they did and they know why they lost, that's when they can start to improve. And while losing will not become fun, as I think Josh said earlier, it will become educational. It will become a learning experience.
Yeah, definitely. And then I guess just for my final point, just kind of like just basically what you said, but you know what I mean? You were talking about the dopamine rush, and we get that from overcoming challenges, right? Like it's just like hardwired into us to seek out challenges and beat them. But when you're seeking out the challenge or you're beating it, when you worked really hard for something, you finally overcome. It's from overcoming it and from learning what you did, right? So like every loss is an opportunity for success. And so like what's the repercussion of failure? What do you lose? And does the failure drive you forward or backwards, right? Like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like you need that, and again, like Tomo said, momentum, right? So always make sure that player is feeling momentum, and the punishment just for not punishment's sake, because that's not fun. No one digs that at all, Josh. Yeah. And I think that kind of summarizes my points there.
Mm-hmm. And to what Chris said about the Estus, yeah, like, again, it's one of the things that I love about the whole idea of having something that is vitally important, but making it infinite. And giving the player control over how much or how little they use it.
Yeah, great idea.
Again, like, look at the difference between Demon Souls and Dark Souls. Demon Souls had the consumable grass that you could heal, but you couldn't just, get it back. The whole idea of the Estus is just such a fantastic idea. And again, it's not designed to make the game, it doesn't break the game. You tell the player, oh, you can heal, but we're only going to give you 5 heals. But you can recharge at, any time you want. It's different than saying, and again, it goes back to psychology. It's different than saying, okay, you can have 20 heals, but guess what? You can't easily replenish them. You'll have to pay for them. And I still will hold that it's the one failing of Bloodborne, that they made the bullets and the blood vials.
Yeah, man. God, that was like the biggest error to me, I think, was the blood vials and the bullets. Like, that was one of the biggest errors. Like Chris was saying, throw the players some XP, like we were talking about Bloodborne. Like, imagine, like, if, like, okay, so there's all these enemies before the checkpoint, and if you defeat one, when you die the next time, he's not there again. Right, so it's not just about, I don't know, that might change something about farming, but that would give you a little bit of progress too, right? Like you'd be okay, well, you get here, or there, just any type of progress, something. It's an idea. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, it's very hard to balance these kinds of elements out, and
and if you recharge, all enemies would appear. There you go.
Yeah. And Chris's point about Diablo, that's another really good one. They changed the healing system from Diablo 2 to 3. 2, you had to have, the 47 belts of potions.
Yeah.
Diablo 3 is, you get one potion, it's infinite, but it has, an 80-second or it was like 100-second cooldown between swigs. And this is the kind of stuff that is different. And I can rant about this if we're not careful for the next hour, but again, you don't want short-term decisions to lead to long-term failure. You want the player to always be able to do stuff immediately, and then let them win stuff long-term. You don't want to tell the player, oh, you used those 5 potions an hour ago, now you can't make any more progress. It's that difference between a consumable that replenishes versus just saying, here's 6, once you use them, they're all gone. But, I'm starting to get into the whole hoarder syndrome point, so I'm going to have to stop.
One of my favorite, like, you brought that up, and, like, I just got PTSD from Fatal Frame 2. Ooh. I got to a point really far in the game, and anyway, I used some film I shouldn't have used.
Oh, no.
And I was there, and I literally never forget that. I was so far in the game, loved it. I still love the game so much, but I made a decision, like, 8 hours back, like so long ago, and there's no way I could go back to that save file, and that. So yeah, definitely, Josh, for
Yeah.
sure.
And I guess to kind of tie this back to losing, to end on, again, this is the reason that you lost, because you didn't know that the game was not going to give you more ammo. So
Yeah,
it's kind of that case again that, well, how was I supposed to know that I wasn't going to get more shotgun rounds or
right.
whatever rounds?
I mean, why would I think that before a boss you wouldn't like at least replenish something for me? Like, right? That was
Mm-hmm.
no idea on my fault, and so you lose. No, nothing I could have done at all.
Yep.
So
And yeah, I think that's a really good point to end on. And that could be something we bring up for the hoarding discussion at some point. That the error where you tell the player, hey, you need to spend 5 hours farming 99 potions. And then if you lose, well, go spend another 5 hours and farm 99 more potions. It's gone. People,
yeah,
and again, to tie us back to losing as well, people don't want to feel like they're wasting time. And like
yeah,
we said with Tomo's discussion, it's about momentum. If
yeah.
I can
What did you lose a whole bunch of time? And
yeah,
it's like, wow, I don't think I
yeah,
like this game anymore.
yeah. Again, if I can just go from here to there, that can be enough of a motivator. But if I go from here to all the way back there, and again, if losing creates more losing, that is something you need to be very careful of in today's market. That, well, I died, so now I have 25% less resources. Then I die again, I get another 25%. So every loss is compounded on the previous loss. That is where a lot of people are going to check out, because now you're just making the act of losing even more punishable by more losing.
Yeah, definitely, Josh. Summed it up perfectly there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. But I think with that, I think that is a good point to end on for the show this week. So, let's see. But yep, again, don't let the player
Don't let the player
waste
waste
time.
time.
Don't let them.
Respect the player's time,
Mhm.
please.
Don't make them feel like they're being punished by playing. Again, there's a difference between losing and being punished for losing. And as another final point again, it's that same mentality with Super Meat Boy. I lose. What do I exactly do I lose when I die in Super Meat Boy? I lose 3 seconds, maybe
Right.
even 1 second. Yep. Have a good night, Vincent. But
That's
again,
it.
we'll be ranting and raving about this for hours to come. So, with that said, thank you everybody for
Thank you,
tuning
Joe.
in. Yep, thank you, Joe and Chris as well. And Mojo is
Chris,
still watching.
Mojo.
For me, be sure to do all the liking, subscribing, and commenting. There's my contact information up there. Again, who knows where Twitter is going to be in the next week, so I don't know if that will still be
Yeah.
relevant.
Yeah, that's my Twitter that's still down there below. You'll still have my Twitter. I don't know what I'm going to do with that either. Um, Wishlist Samurai Pig. There's also a Splinter Cell division of my studio working on Rooster Rampage right now. If you want to check that out, wishlist that one also. And be sure and purchase some of Josh's books. Join our Discord. Have a chat with us, and we will see you next time.
We will be back next Saturday around 5 p.m. ET. And again, be sure to tune into our pilot episode for the Influential Games cast, because we'll be curious to see what people think about that one and about what we discuss. And again, if you do have a suggestion for a future topic, let us know here on Discord, wherever. But that is going to do it. I got some more work to get back to, of course, and so does Josh. So, come back for the discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. And until next time, everybody, have a great rest of your weekend.